Welcome to the bar. This is Straight to the Chase, and today we are going to count down the top 12 second basemen for my draft rankings for 2025. I am your host, Chase Thornton, coming to you from the Mott and Bailey Basement Bar, and I'm starting with second base here because it's such a frustrating position to have to deal with. Along with catcher, I call second base and catcher the tight end of fantasy baseball. If you play fantasy football, you know what a wasteland the tight end position can be. There's very few actual studs, very few reliable options, to the point where not every team in a standard size league is actually going to have a good starting option. And that's kind of how I see second base and catcher in fantasy baseball. Now we're going to talk about catchers next time out, but for second base, there's really only a few guys who are going to be multiple category help for you if you're playing in a roto or categories format. So if you don't want to draft high at the position, and instead, if you want to wait and find your second baseman, you can, probably wait a while and use that position to attack specific categories right off the bat. There's some mid to late round stolen base juice at second base. There's some batting average help. You want power, you probably got to be a little quicker on the trigger for the most part, but that's why we're here, to help you make sense of the landscape and formulate your plan for the Keystone Sack here. Now, before we get started, please like, subscribe, make sure the notifications are on so you can always be alerted when new content drops, and so we can continue to help you chase greatness and dominate your fantasy leagues. Now, let's crack one open here and get straight to the chase. Now, I mentioned the idea that there are only a few studs at second base, and that's true, but we also want to be aware of a couple guys who I didn't rank here for this purpose because they're not yet necessarily eligible on various platforms, but I'm going to mention them here. Jazz Chisholm and Mookie Betts. Those guys would significantly improve the landscape of this position if and when they're eligible. Looks like Chisholm is going to be the starter at the position for the Yankees, with some combination then of Oswaldo Cabrera and Oswald Peraza and Oswald DJ LeMahieu taking over at third base. But he should gain eligibility pretty early this season. You'd need a plan at the position until then if you do draft him and you want to use him as your second baseman. And then you'd also need a pivot at third, because that's where you're going to have to draft him at. You're going to need to double up on that position. But Betts, on the other hand, is the shortstop for the world champs there in Los Angeles, and they want him there. They just signed Hyesung Kim to play second for him, but there's still a chance he either gets moved to second in a swap with Kim, or he plays enough second here and there to kind of regain eligibility there. But those two guys would immediately rocket up into the top three at the position if and when they're eligible. So just keep that in mind, Chisholm and Betts there. But let's talk real quick about three guys who just missed my rankings, but could help you out. Like I said, if you want to use the position to target, say, some specific categories, Bryce Thoron is currently going in the 11th round. Had a nice season last year for my Brewers here, but he's not going to hit for a ton of power, but he could score you some runs if he can just get on base maybe a bit more. His biggest contribution is going to be in the stolen base category. He should lead the position, honestly, and he could challenge for the league lead if everything kind of fell right for him. Nico Horner for the Cubs, likewise, not going to give you much for power numbers. Should be able to deliver nice numbers in stolen bases, batting average. Some question on when he'll be available after an injury here that he's recovering from, so keep an eye on that. And Andres Jimenez, north of the border there in Toronto after the trade from Cleveland. Basically another steals guy who could maybe surprise elsewhere. Remember, he did hit 297 in 2022, but Rogers Center is not going to be any friendlier to his power numbers than Progressive Field was, so keep that in mind as well. But now, hey, for the guys who did make the cut, and let's start off with one Bryson Stott of the Philadelphia Phillies. Stott's he's a speed guy. 32 steals last season. That was good for second to Thoron among second basemen there. He was only caught 3 times. Okay, the dude can run. He hit for a little power. He's had double-digit homers each of his 3 seasons in the majors. He's not going to give you as much there as some of the guys I have maybe a little higher in my rankings, though. So there's that. 2024, kind of a mixed bag for him. His walk rate was the best of his career, 9.3%. Would love to see him get that up around 10 with his speed. But his batting average fell off 35 points from 2023, and that resulted in an overall decline in his on-base percentage. For a guy who's likely hitting lower in the order, man, you would want to see him hit a lot closer to that 2023 mark of 280, because obviously the more he's on base, the more chances he'll have to supplement that, those mediocre counting stats. As is, he still was 11th in scoring last year among second basemen. He's worth a look at his 14th round ADP right now, especially if you need a steals boost on your roster by the time you get to that point in the draft. But at 11 in our rankings is Brandon Lau of the Tampa Bay Rays. Lau was 14th in fantasy scoring last season for second baseman, but he only played in 107 games. Remember, he had an oblique issue early in the season that cost him a chunk of time, and then he came back and then missed almost a week with a fractured toe just before the All-Star break there. Otherwise, hey, he performed just fine when he was out there. His walk percentage was down quite a bit, but his pull numbers were down. He was using the field a little better, though. But the thing I like about Lowe this season is his home stadium, and I'm not talking about Tropicana Field. Remember, Hurricane Milton had his way with the Trop, but the Rays are going to be playing at Steinbrenner Field, the Yankees spring training home. And Steinbrenner Field has identical proportions to Yankee Stadium, which means a real nice short porch in right for Lowe to take aim at this year. Remember, he hit 39 home runs in 149 games for the Rays in 2021. You're drafting Lau at second primarily for his power numbers anyway, but the difference in home venue this season, that could really help, especially if he can stay healthy. He's being drafted in the 19th round. So, I mean, if you want to address power later on, he would be an option there. Maybe even as, say, your middle infielder, if you've already addressed second base and you've got a middle infield slot there, you could add him in there and give a nice quick boost to your power numbers there. Really like him, though, this year with that stadium change. Number 10 is a guy who finished 2024 as the 10th best scorer at second. It's the Nationals' Luis Garcia. Garcia, he broke out a bit last season. He set career highs in games played, at-bats, hits, home runs, RBIs, steals, and batting average. His home run tally of 18 doubled his previous career high from the year prior, right? I mean, despite only playing 18 more games. So he doubled his home run rate from the year before. You look a little deeper, and his hard hit rate was over 5 points higher in 2024 year over year. His fly ball percentage likewise was almost 5% or 5 points higher than his previous career best. Was almost 7 points higher than 2023. He's only 24. All right. He seems to be kind of rounding into form as a major league hitter now. So you're drafting him for that batting average, and then you're hoping for the power numbers to hold or even maybe improve a little bit. Now, I've seen some scuttle online. People are worried about him possibly having to platoon with new national Ahmed Rosario, but I'm not as worried about it. I mean, for one, Garcia plays the big side of the platoon as the lefty bat, but two, he showed some nice defensive improvement last season. He should be able to kind of keep himself on the field more, through that. He could definitely stand to improve, against lefties. He had a 641 OPS last year versus left-handed pitching. That doesn't cut it, but I still think he should be able to find himself in the lineup, obviously, more often than not. Some might be a little wary of an 11th round price tag. I don't blame you that a little bit, but if he fights off that platoon and if he shows that continued improvement, though, you could end up with a real nice value relative to the position there. But he's our number 10. At number 9 is former Yankees second baseman, Gleyber Torres. Now, the Detroit Tigers have Gleyber in town on a 1-year pillow/prove-it deal here, coming off of a relatively disappointing season. 2024 saw him hit for the lowest average of his career for a full season. His power dropped way off. He hit just 15 home runs after back-to-back 20-plus seasons. And his slugging percentage was just 378. That was 75 points off of his 2023 pace. Now, that said, he did perform much better in the second half last season. And even that, as we said, disappointing season last year resulted in a finish of 8th in scoring formats among second basemen. So, I mean, Gleyber's not going to be outstanding for you in any one category. He's just going to be pretty solid across the board, which, I mean, when we're talking about our 9th ranked guy at a position, yeah, right? I mean, he's a solid starting option at a non-premium position who probably has, I'd say, a little more value maybe in points leagues, but he's not going to hurt you in roto formats. He's not going until round 16 either. So, I mean, you have plenty of time to build up the rest of your squad, address your categories, grab your starting pitching, and then you can settle for a guy who most likely is going to end up outperforming that ADP. I think he's just not exciting people at this point in the preseason, but Gleyber Torres, definitely a guy you can plug into your lineup there. Now, number 8 on our list is a guy who will most likely be the primary shortstop for his team, but he should still be able to retain second base fantasy eligibility based on his playing time at second last year. And that's Xander Bogaerts of the San Diego Padres. Now, when it comes to fantasy purposes, Bogaerts, he grades out much better at second, where he's not dealing with so many of the superstars of the game for competition like he would be at shortstop. Right now over at Fantasy Pros, his ECR expert consensus ranking there is second base 9. He's a full 6 spots higher at second, though, than his ECR of 15 at shortstop. Okay, so he's much more valuable to you as a second baseman than he is as a shortstop. If you pick him and have to start him at one or the other. Bogey had a little bit of a roller coaster 2024. He didn't find out he was going to play second base until he arrived to spring training, like literally when he got there. That, oh, by the way, we're going to put you at second this year instead of short. He spent his entire career at shortstop, but to his credit, he kept his head down, made the switch, played well when he was on the field, but he missed, some time last year. He missed from late May up until just before the All-Star break with a fracture in his shoulder, and that cost him a lot of time and obviously cost us a lot of production. This year, being back at his preferred position, I think, should really help with his comfort at the plate. I expect him to return you, nice batting average, maybe even in the 280 range, probably 15, 20 home runs, 15, 20 steals. And he's going to give you mid-level production in runs and RBI, categories there. But, I think you can still do a lot worse at second base than getting Xander Bogaerts there in round 12. So keep an eye on that. Our number 7 player looked like he was set to bust out in a real big way last season, but he had a wrist injury that ended his season early and robbed us of further production from one Luis Rengifo of the Los Angeles Angels. His scoring per game in 2024 actually would have had him solidly in the top 5 at second base. And he's another guy who looks to be just kind of solid, not spectacular across categories. He did hit 300 last season, but that was kind of an outlier based on his what's now his career average of 253. Truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I think 270 is definitely on the table for him. I think he can reach that, no problem. He also should provide a nice steals boost. Look, it's not the most exciting lineup to have a part of. I mean, the Angels, in fact, I've talked about them on previous episodes. They are not the biggest run scoring offense, haven't been. But if Rengifo performs similar to last season's kind of nice surprise, he could make a monster return on an 18th round price tag. I mean, he's not going to the 18th round. You throw in the fact that he's got third base eligibility, and honestly, I mean, he makes a nice little roster addition, even if you don't take him as your starting second baseman, even if you just take him for depth by the time you get to the 18th round, you could come away with a real nice value there. So now at this point, we're going to toast. We've reached the top half of the rankings. And we've got another dual eligibility name here that carries a little more sizzle in the industry headed into 2025. We're talking about Jordan Westburg of the Baltimore Orioles. Okay, now he looks destined to play third for the O's this season. It looks like top prospect Jackson Holliday is likely going to make his first opening day roster. He's going to be given the keys at second base, but Westburg should retain his second base eligibility, even though he's going to be manning the hot corner more often than not there. But his numbers from last season, they don't immediately jump off the page when you look, but you got to keep in mind his counting stats were real limited because he missed almost 2 full months with a broken hand after he got hit by a pitch there mid-season. Like Rengifo, his per game scoring in 2024 would have ranked him top 5 at second base for a full season. And his numbers, you prorate them out to a full year's worth, he would have had a rank right at or near the top in several categories for the second base position as well. So, I mean, he performed very well. He did very well with runners on base last season, had an OPS of 925 with runners on base last season. You compare that to his overall mark of 792 overall. I mean, the dude buckled down when it was crunch time. When it was clutch time, he was a guy that the O's wanted up there at the plate. He was a guy that came through, seemed like more often than not. So I'm probably guilty maybe of pumping the brakes on him a bit here, keeping him down at 6. But I mean, I'd really like to see that type of performance play out over a full season before I go and spend an 8th or 9th round pick on him, which is probably where you're going to have to grab him if you are so inclined to do so. But at number 5 is old friend of fantasy baseball players everywhere, Ozzie Albies. Albies has been drafted as a top 5 position, or top 5 option, at the position at second base every year since 2019, after he broke out with an all-star campaign in 2018. So, I mean, we were taking him as a top 5 option after that, and he promptly rewarded his fantasy managers with a silver slugger season, and he has been racking up numbers on the field ever since. But as we like to say on this show, therein lies the rub, racking up the numbers when he's on the field. Albies, unfortunately, he seemingly has gone with kind of an every other year approach, health-wise. Now, when he's healthy, like I said, he's an all-star, silver slugger candidate. And the good news for fantasy managers who might be looking to draft him this year is, hey, it's due to be a healthy season for Ozzie Albies. He missed over half of the shortened COVID season in 2020 with a wrist injury. And then a broken foot and a broken finger held him to just 64 games in 2022. And then last year, he saw 2 more broken bones. This time it was a toe and then a wrist, and that held him to just 99 games played. But 2025 is an odd year. Remember how it seemed like every other year for a while, about 10 years ago, every other year, the Giants, the San Francisco Giants were really good and would make the World Series. That's kind of Ozzie Albies' health. That's kind of how he rolls. 2025 is an odd year. Albies should be back to offering you somewhere around 150 games played, probably around 30 home runs, probably around 100 or so runs scored, 100 RBIs. And either way, probably going to be a top 3 positional finish or damn close to it in points leagues for you. He's going right around the round 4 or 5 turn in your drafts. But I think he's worth that price, especially when you consider the positional scarcity of multi-category threats at second base. There just aren't a whole lot of them, and he is definitely one to watch. I like him better maybe at his ADP than a couple of the guys that I have ranked ahead of him. I have them ranked ahead of him based on what I think maybe their potential is this season, but ADP wise, Ozzie Albies might be a big target for me. Now, my number 4 might surprise some people, but I'm high on the potential this season for the returning Matt McLain of the Cincinnati Reds. Now, McLain missed all of last season after he had surgery to repair a torn labrum in his left shoulder. Was diving on the field in the preseason and blew his shoulder out. Didn't look bad at first, but then ended up having to have surgery. He should be healthy, though, and ready to rock for 2025. Now, last time we saw him on the field, he was bouncing back and forth across the middle infield for Cincinnati on his way to a 5th place finish in Rookie of the Year voting, despite the fact he only played 89 games that season, right? He's got 25, 30 home run potential, I think. He could get to 90 runs, 90 RBIs as well, if he could get a full season's worth of games in there. Now, we need to keep an eye on the Reds because their recent acquisition of Gavin Lux kind of changes the calculus a little bit in the Reds infield. We got to see how that shakes out. We thought we knew how things were going to shake out with Ellie De La Cruz at short, and we were going to put McLain at second. We were going to be good to go, but now there's talk that McLain might move to the outfield, or Ellie might move to third, or we might keep them in place and move Lux around. Either way, McLain's going to cost you about a 10th round pick. And I'm really hoping that the Reds can just find a spot for him and leave him there so that he can just get down to the business of hitting and being the player that we know he can be. Either way, I like his prospects for the year, though, and I'm willing to gamble he retains that second base eligibility, so I'd be willing to take him there, especially in the 10th round. But we have reached now the top three. Cheers, y'all. And in the number 3 spot is another old, reliable Marcus Semien. Okay. After 3 straight seasons of finishing as the top scoring player at his position, top overall shortstop 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago, the top overall second baseman, and again, the top overall second baseman, he could only muster a third place finish at second base for points formats here last year. Now the man is 34, so some decline might be inevitable, obviously, but even in a somewhat disappointing season, Semien led all second basemen in runs. He was second in home runs, second in RBIs. Now his batting average slipped a bit. In fact, it was his lowest batting average for a full season's worth of work, but you could probably chalk that up to some fluky luck. Okay. If you take a look, he only hit 250 on balls in play. And that's 30 points below his career average. He still maintained he had a manageable strikeout rate. He didn't strike out a ton, and his walk rate was dead on with his career average. I expect his batting average to make a rebound. He probably won't ever threaten 280 again, like he has before, but something more in line with that career 255 average. That should keep him in the running for another top 3 finish, I think, among second basemen. I mean, especially in points leagues. He's one of the better multi-category players at the position, even as he's aging up a bit. I still think he's worth that late 5th round that you're going to have to spend to get him, the early to late, but in the 5th round there. As we already covered, I mean, there's plenty of help to be had. He's not going to give you much for stolen bases, but man, this is the position where you can attack stolen bases later in the draft if you want to take one of the lower tier guys, like I said, fill your middle infield spot with a guy that makes up for the lack of stolen bases that you're going to get with Marcus Semien there. But he should be well on his way to another top 3 finish here at the position. But at number 2 is a guy he's been another mainstay among the top 3 at that position. And we're talking about Houston Astros perennial all-star Jose Altuve. Okay, now the diminutive dynamo, and I call him that knowing full well that he's an inch taller than I am. But the little guy put in another workmanlike performance for the Astros last season. He finished top 4 among second basemen in home runs, RBIs, and batting average, tied for 6th in steals. He has maybe been the most consistent 5-category player at that position in recent years. Now, like the other Lone Star State second baseman we just talked about, Altuve's 34 years old. And if you dig a little deeper into things, there are some signs that his age might be catching up to him a little bit. His strikeout rate last couple years actually has been up. He actually struck out 119 times last season. That was a career high by a long shot. He'd never struck out over, I think 91 maybe was his previous career high in strikeouts for a season. His walk rate plummeted after 2 career high years there in a row. He had walked over 10% of the time for the last 2 years, and then last season dipped to like 6.8, something like that. He also, he was swinging at more pitches out of the zone. He had the highest swinging strike rate of his career. But all that said, heck, he still hit better than league average and better than his career average on balls in play there. He still was better than league average in taking extra bases, still better than league average at scoring once he actually got on base. He's going to be a productive second baseman for whomever drafts him. He's maybe not the juggernaut we saw 8-10 years ago when he was winning and every year getting MVP votes. But for the position, hey, he's still got it, dude. I mean, there's no other way around it. He's going to cost you a 4th round pick if you're feeling froggy, as my dad says. But I don't know if I'm quite as excited about him at that price. But the positional scarcity, I mean, hey, it makes people do strange things, for one. But for two, like I said, you are going to get production out of him relative to the position. That's hard to find in other places. So Jose Altuve. That's our number 2. We finally reached our number 1 ranked fantasy second baseman for 2025. Drum roll, please. It's last year's surprise top scoring second baseman, Ketel Marte. Now, listen, it wasn't a mind-blowing shock that Marte finished number 1 at the position last year. I mean, he was top 10 in 2022. He was top 3 in 2023. So, I mean, it had been there. But the jump in home run numbers, I think, last year, a career high 36. That wasn't something that too many people had on their radar when we were taking him last year as the number 9 second baseman in the 8th and 9th round there. I mean, if you look at it, though, there's no secret to why those numbers jumped. He just swung harder. I mean, look at it. He had the highest exit velocity of his career by almost 3 miles an hour. And his hard hit percentage was over 11 points better than his previous career high ever. You know, I mean, he had the highest pull rate of his career by a long shot too. His plate discipline, the cool thing about this, his plate discipline, his contact numbers, they were all right in line with his career averages. So it wasn't like he was sacrificing contact for power or anything like that. He wasn't just wildly swinging from the heels. He was making better quality contact, period. He was swinging hard and making contact. And that tells me that he should be able to at least maintain something close to last year's production as long as he could stay healthy, right? I mean, you're talking about a 4-category stud at a position that is sorely lacking in multifaceted offensive threats. I mean, that's tempting. But you are going to pay through the nose for him this year. It's going to take a late second rounder to secure his services. Okay. And that feels really rich for me. Really rich for me, but it also depends on, I mean, how your draft shakes out, how your league drafts. You know your league better than I do. But either way, hey, I mean, I expect Marte to put up a similar performance to last season. I think he's going to give fantasy managers a big advantage at the position. You know, similar to, I mean, I keep equating the position to tight end. Travis Kelce over the rest of them in fantasy football. I mean, how many times did that pay off for people that drafted him there? The positional advantage is a big key there. So, you know, you're going to have to spend that second rounder, like I said, but when you get him, you should enjoy a healthy advantage there that you can then, you know, hopefully use to your advantage elsewhere in the draft as well. But that's going to do it for us here on Straight to the Chase. I want to remind you again, hey, like, subscribe, all of that. But also, hey, get over to fantasybaseballadvice.com. Like it says in the ticker, sign up for a membership. You can catch all of my fantasy baseball content over there. You'll have access to our fantasy sports only social media platform. So you can friend me on there. You can ask questions all year round on fantasy baseball, fantasy football, WNBA fantasy. It's all sports all the time. Also, hey, give us a follow. Give the Fantasy Baseball Advice Network a follow. Give me a follow on the Twitter X machine. You can see them right down there at the bottom on the ticker there. So you can always stay connected and always get the latest on what's going on around fantasy baseball. I want to thank you so much for watching here. But until next time, we are going to get up and get out of here. Gone.
We are here. FantasySportsAdvice.com, offering the best fantasy sports social media platform. Why join endless Discord communities or the trolls of Reddit? Fantasy Sports Advice is a community designed to help you win with 24/7 support. Go to FantasySportsAdvice.com and become a pro member for unlimited access. Again, go to FantasySportsAdvice.com today.